Hi everyone, I'm Monica of HeartcraftPaper. Thanks for joining us on Lavinia World. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a shadow box card. The first thing you're going to need are 2 sheets of 5.5 by 7. This will fit into a 5.5 by 5.5 envelope. I'm going to start off by scoring the cards. I'm going to score at 1.5 and then again at 5.5. You want to make sure that you score very well because I am using a 110-pound cardstock and this is actually very thick. I prefer using this particular cardstock for this type of card because it offers a lot of stability. Again, 1.5 and then again on 5.5. And as you can see here, this is very, very sturdy. So moving on here, I have 3 strips of white cardstock. Each of these measure 5 by 1.5. Now, these will be die cut if you'd like, but they're gonna offer the support for your images. We're gonna score these 1/2 inch from each side. So I'm gonna score at 4.5 and then at 1/2 inch, or 1/2 inch and then 4.5. I use the same type of cardstock for these particular supports. Again, I want to offer as much stability as I can with my paper. So now I'm going to bring back the card that I'm going to use as the backing of my shadow box, and this is going to be a little hack for you. I'm going to score at 1/2 inch on each side. So I'm going to score at 1/2 inch, then at 1 inch, and this is going to help in the placement of my supports. And then I'll come here to 6 and then 6.5 and score right on down. Again, with this paper, you want to make sure you score well just because it's quite thick and you want to be able to see those score lines there. So this is how this is going to work. As you can see, I'm folding this over at the 1/2 inch score line and it sits right into that little groove. This is just more or less for someone who may not be so sure of where placement might be. Now we know where we're going to place our cutout here for the front part of our shadow box. So the score lines will indicate the center. You can use any type of die that will suit your need. And in this particular case, I chose this one because of the size and it fits perfectly. I'm gonna go ahead and set this about 1/2 inch from the top and bottom of my card. Once I have this where I want it, I'm gonna go ahead and use some low tack tape or washi tape, which is usually my favorite, to adhere this down onto my card so I can pass this safely through my machine so that it does not budge. As you can see here, I eyeballed it about 1/2 inch from top and bottom, so we're good to go. Here I have my items all cut out. Now, all I'm gonna do is set aside the centerpiece because if you're anything like me, I like to kind of keep these cutouts because I can use it for something else. All right, time to add in some color. I'm gonna be using my Distress Oxides for this. I want to give this a night sky feel, so I'm going to come in with Shaded Lilac. I'm going to blend this all the way down, just about 3/4 of the way. This will give it the effect of the sun setting and you have that darkened sky at the top and the lightness as the sun kind of comes down. So that's what I was going for here. I'll be coming in with a darker color later. Now, you want to make sure that you add in enough color here because otherwise it's going to show through a lot of the white. I am extending the coloring all the way through to the sides, although they will be on the sides of the cards. You are going to see it. You want to make sure that you get enough coverage there. Next, I'm going to bring in some Blueprint Sketch. This will help me get that nighttime sky gradation that I'm looking for. I'm going to use that on the upper third of my card. This is going to be the top of my card. One of the things I love about blending with Distress Oxide is the saturation of color that you can get. Now, here, I'm going to soften up the line of the sky that you have between the shaded lilac and the sketch blue by going back and forth and kind of creating that slight gradation. With our blending complete, we can now move on to our next step. I'm going to be using the Leafy Stencil by Tim Holtz. I want to get the effect of peeking through a willow tree out into the night sky. I'm going to blend in some Seedless Preserve. For this particular color, I'm only going to be bringing it down halfway on this particular craft. I don't want it to take up the whole entire thing, but you want to make sure that you get plenty of color, just so that way it looks nice and beautiful and you have these purples and blues going on. Now here for the center, I'm just going to bring in some paper and kind of block off a part of this stencil so I can get one leaf right there in the middle. And as you can see, I'm taking my time with this. So just make sure that you're careful so you don't get it everywhere. And here you have it. Now, let's get working on our background. Again, I'm gonna bring in the shaded lilac. This is gonna be in the center of the actual background here, okay? We will be bringing in another color that'll be a little bit darker, yet not quite too dark. Let's see, this is gonna be Wilted Violet. And this is gonna go from the sides and top of the actual background. Again, while you might not necessarily see this when the card is open or the shadow box is open, you will be seeing it when it is closed or if you're peeking in from the sides. So it's really important to kind of deliver that color throughout your whole entire card and throughout the whole entire process. Again, you're gonna see me going back and forth just to kind of fade out these colors. Bring in your front card piece just to kind of see where else you might need to add a little bit more color. I'm gonna bring down that color a little bit more towards the center just because I felt that it was lacking quite a bit. You really couldn't see that wilted violet in there. So I wanna make sure I get a little bit more of that color going. All right, time to see how well that looks. I think that looks perfect. We've got enough color kind of popping through. All right, I want to create a moon for this scene. So I'm going to check my placement and I have die cut some masking tape so that I can use this to create my moon. Now I've used it before, so it's starting to lose a little bit of tack. I'm going to use Picket Fence. I'm gonna put this right onto my glass mat here. I'm not gonna use my brush directly onto that particular ink pad because I don't want the other colors transferring onto my white. Otherwise, it's gonna go ahead and deliver those colors onto any other projects I might use. So this is the best way of actually doing this. I went back several times and added plenty of white in order to create a nice crisp moon. Now, it won't necessarily be exactly white or stark white. It will have some of that shaded lilac kind of peeking through, but that's okay. That's exactly the effect that we're looking for. Once I feel that I've put down enough color that it'd be what I'd like, I'm gonna go ahead and remove my masking tape. And I love the way that this actually looks. Here you notice that I'm going back with the picket fence and going around the moon. This is gonna create a little bit of a halo or a light of halo around the moon itself. I did have to go back in several times with the picket fence just because the white is so translucent. In order to create that halo, you wanna make sure you get enough color done. And as you can see, we're getting there. Here's a closer look so you can see that ring of light right around that moon. So for my image support, I'm gonna go ahead and die cut these. I have a wavy border, which is a hill die that I have. I believe this is from MFT. I don't know, it's been a while since I got these. So I am going to adhere them down onto my base here, and we're gonna pass them through the die cutting machine. It did take me a little bit of adjusting to figure out exactly where I wanted them because I wanted one to be a little bit smaller. Since they are the same size, I really could have probably cut these out, one larger, one smaller, but I kind of do things as I go and I don't necessarily plan them out. So here you see that we have our paper ready to go, our support, and they're nice and die cut with the way that I felt I would like to see them. With our support cut out and ready to go, it's time to bring in some color. I'm using forest moss for the top portion of this particular cutout. I wanted to create a dark hill and then create some lightness below. I'm gonna bring in some Mowed Lawn into this and bring that color up towards the top. One of the things about using the blending technique for your crafts is that it offers a lot of variance in color. You don't necessarily have to stick with just one color. You can add depth to your images or to your die cuts just by simply layering those colors out. And as you can see here, I'm bringing in some of that forest moss again, and that is just adding quite a bit of color, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. So this is what I have in mind as far as laying these out. I want the hills to kind of be offset. Okay, now that I have let my background dry, I'm gonna come in with my mini mister and just go over that with water in order to have it activate that distress oxide. This will help with the illusion of stars in the background in the night sky as well. You don't want to get too heavy-handed with the water, you just want it to have small droplets here and there. You can also splatter some water with the brush as well. Now to add some stars. I'm going to be bringing in Picket Fence for this. Again, I want to make sure that I have some detail in the background, not a lot, because we want that focus to be on our images that are coming forward. Because of the lightness of Picket Fence, you're gonna wanna stamp up multiple times. I think I did it maybe 3 or 4 times in order to get the color that I wanted to show. As you can see, it offers detail, but very subtle, and I absolutely love how this looked. Since I'm working the card all in one day, I'm gonna go ahead and heat set this. Typically, I would let it kind of dry overnight, but this is the quickest way to get your ink to dry. You're gonna heat set the background, the foreground, as well as the supports. You know, while I'm doing this, I'm looking at the color of the green just popping off those purples. It just really shows up so well. I love how this turned out. I'm gonna add a little bit of shine to my front. I'm gonna do this by adding some opal polish, and that is gonna be very sporadic. So it's gonna be a few leaves here and there. It's just to add a little bit of shine and shimmer to this card on the front. I don't want it to be too overpowering since I already have a lot of detail with the stencil and the color, and then you're gonna see the images in the background. So it'll probably wash out a lot if you do too much. Time to start bringing in my images. I'm going to use this little one here for the fairy foragers. I decided on the upper right corner because it looks like she is reaching out towards something, and I figured that it would be a fairy flying out and reaching towards the moon. Now I'm using black soot in order to stamp out this image. I don't want it too intensely black. Time to check my positioning and make sure that this is within the frame. And I think this is perfect. You have the moon there in the middle. You have the fairy kind of floating off towards that moon, reaching towards it. And that was the ideology behind this. I'm going to be working with the dandelion set for this image as well. For this, I'm going to need some black archival ink. And the reason being is you probably can't see it here, but I do have an acetate sheet there. So the reason I'm using acetate is because I want that background blending just to pop through that image. And here you have it. You're gonna heat set this and then let it dry overnight. Now that it's dry, time to start cutting around this. I'm gonna fussy cut quite liberally around the stem because that's gonna be our support. Besides, you don't have to worry about it showing through anyways. For the main image, I chose to use the fairy chain. This is a large fairy chain. We're gonna be using regular white cardstock. And the reason for this is because I wanted to add a little bit more detail with glitter. I wasn't too sure if the glitter would actually stick. So we're gonna go ahead and stamp this off several times. I think I did this maybe 3 times just to get that intense black. As you can see, sometimes it does leave a bit of patches here and there, but that's okay. The more you stamp, the better it gets. I figured this image would give the idea of having a moon celebration that the fairies were having, so it fit perfectly. Next, I'm going to be moving on to the maple leaves. This is going to be a color stamped image. I'm using Mowed Lawn and Forest Moss for this. This way it gives more of a dimensional type look to that particular image. I stamped these images out 3 times so I could get a variation and then pick the ones that I liked. It does give a wonderful marbleization to this particular image, just like you would find in natural leaves. Because I want to use these right away, I'm going to go ahead and heat set them. Just because they're dry doesn't mean that they won't leave a little bit of color, so it's best to heat set. For this particular image, I'm cutting it down to 4 inches. Now, initially, I started off taking off a quarter here and a quarter on the next side, and eventually I moved on to 1/2 inch. For whatever reason, my mind went. Now, I want to make sure I cut out the details, so using an X-Acto knife that I have here, I'm going to start cutting out my image. I don't want there to be this large piece, so I'm being very careful to work around my image so that I don't cut something out unnecessarily. Please note that I use the feet as a point of attachment for the bottom. This is where it's going to attach to the base. I'm going to leave a swatch out there for it. Now, yes, this is a bit time consuming, but for the effect that I wanted, I had to actually do this. Not everybody will have to do this. It depends on what you're using and how you want to make your particular shadow box. So it's always up to you. So here's the image all cut out. Coming in with the black marker, I just refined some of those white edges a little bit more to make sure that they had more coverage. So here's the reason that I wanted to go with white cardstock. I added some glue to the wings with a glue pen and then sprinkled on some glitter right onto that. This color fit the project perfectly. Time to work the maple leaves. Here I'm cutting around them very close. I want to make sure that I don't leave too much white out there. I chose to cut up some of these maple leaves into smaller bits rather than a whole branch that you have here, and that kind of helped with my decoration in the actual shadow box. You'll see what I mean later on in the video. Finally, we're ready to start constructing. I'm gonna fold along the inner crease that I have set here. The other ones are set as guides. Now, I did have a little bit of a problem kind of doing this, and as you can see, I have a little blotch that ended up happening. I wasn't too concerned because it is gonna be covered up, but gluing it, you wanna make sure you lay down your pieces where you want them. I ended up having to lift these up and then back out and put them back in. Because of the way that this is, it's going to be covered up, so you can always have boo-boos here and there. As long as you're able to cover them up, there's no worries. So here, as you can see, I laid down my first piece, but then I added glue to the second part, and then I totally forgot. No, I have to insert my first piece of grass. No, it's a little bit too low, so I ended up gluing it a little bit higher, and it worked out in the end. But you know, again, I made the mistake, and it's always fixable. That's the great thing about card making. You can always make errors, but you have ways of covering them up. I'm gonna set the first of my dandelions in. I'm adhering it with double-sided tape, and this is 1/8 double-sided tape. I put it there in the back. Now I'm gonna bring my main image in so I can work around it. As you can see, I have a little bit kind of peeking out from behind that hill. I'm just gonna trim that off. Since two of my images are gonna be free-floating, I'm gonna go ahead and use acetate to add a little bit of support. Simply use double-sided tape in order to adhere it to the back of the image and to your support at the bottom. So here I have the images with the support in place. I'm ready to glue this onto my forefront hill. Now, I'm a bit clumsy, so I ended up dropping it here and there. It's okay. Now, once I've got that set, I'm now ready to kind of work around the image and figure out where I want placement of my other items. Here's a glimpse of what that's gonna look like. Time to start folding that cover. So it's a simple technique. Now, I just wanna make sure I lie it down in the direction that my card is going to lay. I'm going to start by adhering the right side. Once I have that in place and glued down, then I will go ahead and fold it down again and then glue my left side down as it's folded over. By working it this way, you ensure that when your piece is ready to go in that envelope, it lies nice and flat and that it doesn't create any bends in the paper. Once you've got it set in place, work it back and forth to make sure that the paper knows what it needs to do. Now time to add those maple leaves in. This will allow us to have a bit of color kind of drawing up from the bottom to the top. And I really like the fact that it goes so well against the purple. Now I want to make sure I add my final dandelion so I can work around that as well. I'm going to work in the final pieces of the maple leaves, and as you can see here, I cut up one small one that came into the center. I ended up trying to fit this all the way around, but I figured it covered up that fairy image in the back and brought it towards the bottom. This helped because it drew the eye line down towards the bottom as well. Now for my sentiment. Usually I like to stamp out a sentiment onto the back of my card, but I wanted some blending, so I did this on a separate piece and then just adhered it down. This is now complete. I absolutely love how this turned out. Thank you for watching Lavinia World. We hope to see you back again. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos and tutorials like these. Leave comments if there's anything in particular that you would like to see, and all items will be linked in the description below.